Hi, welcome to a new episode of Engineering Rebuilt.
Do you think you know a lot about construction?
Maybe we can provide a fresh perspective.
This is a podcast where we rebuild preconceptions of engineering,
Reclaim the narrative,
and share the voices of women from across the construction industry. Why not join us?
Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Engineering Rebuild podcast. I'm your host, Tina Gunnarsson, and together with Yvonne Raleigh, today I'm joined by the absolutely brilliant Bryony Coombs. So, Bryony is a Cambridge graduate. You've worked in all stages of construction, in a project's life cycle, from the bid team, you've been a design coordinator, a section engineer. We built Minigo Bridge in Rwanda together, and you're now a transformation lead, balancing that with playing Premiership rugby. You're also an outspoken D&I champion, the brains behind reverse mentoring in our company, and you've organized 2 inspiring women's conferences. And best of all, possibly, is that you're not afraid of speaking your mind when things aren't right. So I'm really, really excited to introduce the 2 of you together. I think we're going to have a really, really cracking podcast episode. So Bryony, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, it's great to be here. I've heard a lot about it and I'm very excited to meet you, Yvonne.
Yeah, I'm excited to meet you too. This is going to be an interesting one.
So where do we want to start?
Let's start with rugby, because I am fascinated by how you become a rugby playing engineer. So I think we should start. I'm guessing rugby started before engineering, or did the engineering start before rugby?
Well, I think I was about 17 and my older sister had gone to university, started playing rugby, and I went up to my PE teacher and said, can we start a rugby team? And she said, if you want to play rugby, you're going to have to go and play with the boys. So I contacted a local senior men's team and said, I know you haven't got a women's team, but can I come and play? I want to learn how to play rugby. So I turned up age 17 with my football boots. And yeah, that's where it started really. So I spent a few months training with the men's team, and then when I went to university, started playing for a women's team. And at the time I was a lot smaller than I am now. And I learned to tackle on fully grown men, and that's where it all began really.
So you decided to do rugby before you decided to do engineering at that point, or were you still?
It was sort of all at the same. It was all at the same time. So it was, So I kind of was applying to university. Was in my last year at school. Started playing rugby. Before that, I'd done competitive trampolining, but like leotards really just weren't my thing. So I'm more of a rugby pitch kind of girl. And then when I went to university, I was studying engineering, and I really just needed like an outlet really. And I remember turning up at the rugby club, and I remember meeting these girls and just being like, okay, these are my people. Like super welcoming, super outgoing, kind of just, if you're willing to put your body on the line for each other every week, then, like everyone got on. And and I just really enjoyed that environment. So just sort of started playing alongside studying. And I think there was probably a few people from the engineering side of my degree that maybe thought I spent too much time playing rugby. but ultimately for me it was like my outlet. So I played my university team for 4 years whilst I was there. And I guess like that's where I started getting quite heavily involved in a lot of the sort of kind of D&I elements of things that I've kind of carried on into my career. So did a lot of work with sort of promoting the women's team and getting equality with the men's team. Typically at the time, the men used to play their varsity matches at Twickenham, and we didn't. So that was something high on my agenda to make fair. That's sort of where it all began.
Sounds seriously cool. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in an era where women's rugby was non-existent. You guys have the benefit on me of a few years, and it would have been a seriously cool thing to participate in. But there we go. Yes,
I think it's also the sort of thing that's grown over the time that I've been involved with it. So when I started, when I first started working, I kind of just turned up at Richmond, and they had 3 teams, and I thought, I'll try and make at least one of them. And it was, a few weeks in, and I was playing, for the first team against Saracens, and I was thinking, this has seriously escalated. Like, I'm trying to establish myself in my new graduate job, and here I am, like running right on a rugby pitch at the weekend. But it's the sort of thing that just hooks you, and once I got a taste of kind of what sort of like an elite playing environment was like, for me it was just like, okay, this is something that I want to do and something I want to commit to. So didn't really look back after that.
and I'm guessing you don't get paid what the men get paid.
This is the thing. So I don't get paid at all. So I played from 2016 to 2020. I played for Richmond. I played rugby union, and then I moved to Manchester in 2021. And no, I didn't. I moved to Manchester in the summer of 2020, and and started playing rugby league. So basically really wanted to carry on playing sort of high level sport. This time last year, turned up at Warrington Wolves. Hadn't really played that much rugby league, but obviously come from a kind of rugby union background. And played my first season of Super League rugby last year, which was amazing and really cool. But I've never been paid to play rugby. It's a full-time hobby on top of a full-time job.
Seriously challenging to balance a hobby like that.
We've had a few conversations about I guess juggling or balancing rugby with a full-time engineering career, but how it actually makes you better.
Yeah, I think I definitely stand by that, because I think that it gives me perspective on the other. So sometimes you have like a really hard long day at work, and you just think what you want to do least is like commute for an hour to get to rugby, to run around in the mud. But you get there, you can't think about work, you can't think about any of the things, good or bad, that have happened. It's like it ticks like all your boxes of like having some social time, like doing some exercise and stuff. So for me, like, definitely feel like on a day-to-day basis it pushes me. But I also think I think sometimes at work that people think that work is everything to me, and work is important, and I do like to do a good job, and I pride myself on doing a good job. But I do a good job at work until 6 o'clock, and then I do a good job at rugby for the rest of the evening. And I think for me that's really important, if not a bit exhausting sometimes.
It's interesting. Lots of men play sport after work, and they go out and they socialise, and there's this perception that women are more dedicated or expected to be more dedicated, and actually we all have lives too. Shocking, isn't it? I mean, God, having a social life in engineering.
I think that what observation that I've made maybe is that that somehow like playing rugby seems like a legitimate reason to leave work on time. in the same way that, going to pick up your children from school seems like a legitimate reason to leave work on time, which it obviously is. But other people's reasons for leaving work on time are somehow less valid, and I really just don't think that is true. Like, if I want to go home and watch Netflix and sit on the sofa at 6 o'clock, or I want to go and play high level sport, like, why does it matter to you? Like, I should, like, and that for me is, really important. And I think, when, especially when I was more junior, I was like very clear, like, there was jobs that I didn't take, or there was, limits on jobs that I had, because I was like, well, I play sport, I have to, train like 4 or 5 times a week. So that like work needs to fit around that. And I think that helped other people also say, no, I'm leaving on time, or I'm leaving early, or this is what I do outside of work, and that's what I want to fit in. So for me, it's obviously like, I have to do that to be able to do the sport and the work at the same time. But for me, it's about then using that to sort of provide a platform for other people to feel like they can also do that. And that for me is important, because, yeah, I think fundamentally I'm driven by like things being fair for everybody. So yeah.
And I love that you take the approach of leading by example rather than, I don't know, talking about it. You just kind of do it.
Yeah, just like turn up to work with my rugby boots like strapped to my bag because I can't fit them in my bag, and all the food that I need to eat in a 12-hour day or whatever it is. So yeah.
That's exactly it. So how do you think that has prepared you to thrive in, I guess, what's considered a male-dominated environment?
I guess for me, it's like you sort of tell people that you play rugby, and some people are like, oh yeah, I can see that, and some people are like, oh really, and they're a bit shocked. So I think it's like definitely just like prepared me to just be like, oh well, people are going to like make assumptions about like who you are and what you do, and then like you can, it's almost like you kind of like squash those expectations. So I think like rugby kind of like prepared me for that. So then like in the engineering world, it's kind of like, if people are ever shocked, then, I'm kind of like used to that. I think like the other thing is that just like I think every woman I've ever played rugby with is like a like strong, empowered female. And so like I've just got this like massive girl gang of like strong-minded, like physically very strong women that I'm like, I've always got my back. And that's like sometimes nice. Especially like sometimes when you have a challenging day at work, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to see the rugby girls tonight, and I'm going to like rant for 10 minutes about what's happened, and I know that they're going to have my back, and they're probably going to give me some really good advice. So yeah, I think like the network of women that I've met through rugby has definitely
it's interesting, isn't it? Because we were talking about the importance of networks with Tina and Lena in previous episodes, and the fact that actually when you get more women together, that it becomes much easier to be yourself. It's when I was the only woman on site for almost all of the jobs that I worked on, other than perhaps the secretary and the office manager. And so it's very isolating to be that individual person. I prepped by going to military college. I went to the Royal Military College of Science, 3,000 guys, 5 girls. Yeah, I mean, it's the ideal preparation for being on a construction site, because you immediately learn that actually you have to make your voice heard, because otherwise nobody's going to listen. And that experience, but it would have been nice to have that group of people, and I know that Tina, you found that really useful in what you've been doing.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess Bryony is part of my personal cheerleading squad, and I'm part of hers. And I think a result of our friendship is I've definitely gone for opportunities or taken steps I otherwise would have second-guessed myself for, I would never have gone for. But there's this group of great people who go, yeah, of course, you should go for it. Of course you're qualified. And it's so important just for career and emotional well-being and all sorts. So yeah, I mean, it's actually really interesting hearing how you've got a good network out of rugby. Go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so one of the women that I play with said this. So she's recently changed careers, and she said that, you know, the camaraderie and the sort of like team feeling that she gets like playing rugby, and then she'd like go to work on a Monday and think, okay, like, you know, it was such a high on a Sunday playing sport, and then like coming into work, and actually like that like led to her like, you know, making a career change to sort of try and replicate that. And I think that sometimes I think, you know, I feel like I have that. I feel like I have that in the networks that I have through work. And yeah, Tina's right that I think what's also amazing is that, like, you know, I've got this kind of like handful of just like amazing women that I'm lucky enough to work with, but also, you know, we socialize outside of work as well. But three of us like are friends because we were basically all nominated for the same award at like a, you know, an industry awards event, and we were all like up against each other, and we just thought it was so ridiculous that we were having to compete against each other that we basically decided that we were just going to become really good friends. And like, you know, that for me is just like, that's like amazing as well, right? So I think there's this like feeling generally that some people think that like women are always like fighting against each other because there's not that many of us. And actually, like, my experience has been like, okay, we're just gonna like pull each other up, and we're gonna push each other up. And, you know, if Tina achieves something, that's not taking away from me achieving something, or Lena achieving something. That's actually like, that's like amazing, and we can celebrate that, and that's not at my detriment.
Women are very protective of their positions. I mean, I've met some women in the industry who've gone out of their way to make it difficult for other women to join them at a level. They get to board level, and they're pulling the ladder up, and you're thinking, well, hold on a minute. You got to board level, you should be lowering down the rope ladder, because the rest of us are down here. We've helped you to get there, and now you need to be part of the solution that gets us all to that point as well. And I mean, certainly it's great to have the camaraderie, but there are definitely isolated, hopefully, examples of women who
Yeah.
really don't take that approach.
Yeah.
I like how you missed out the part of that story where there were three of you up against each other in the same category. And we all kind of thought, oh my God, all three of you are so brilliant. How are they going to pick a winner? And then they went and picked a fourth person who wasn't one of you three. And we were all kind of just shocked, like, how could it not be?
But then we were like, who are they? Let's go and be friends with them. Like,
but that's it, right? So I think the more women who are more successful, the more role models we have, the more we can help other people. It's kind of like a collaborative joint effort to get everyone up at the same time, rather than a like solo trip upwards, which is just really hard and quite
I also
got a question, I think, for both of you actually, because you're both probably among the most outspoken women I know, and as someone who's definitely not naturally outspoken, what goes through your mind when you hear something it's not right? What helps you overcome that kind of internal barrier that says just be quiet, because it's easier to let something slip?
I think if you ask my parents, like, it's just been fundamentally driven into me, like, not even driven into me, but like, it's just been fundamentally part of who I am from the very beginning, that things should be fair. Like, you know, right down to like, you know, who gets the extra chocolate when I was like 4 years old, you know? And I think that genuinely, like, I just want things to be fair, and it's, and so I struggle to like look at things that aren't, and like let them pass me by. I think, you know, there's that kind of feeling which is like, right, I just need to do something about this. And I think like there's the other part of me that thinks, okay, so if I say something, how is this going to affect everybody in this situation? So if I observe, you know, some inappropriate behavior, for example, you know, my immediate reaction is like, okay, I'm really angry. And then I'm like, okay, if I'm really angry, how is the person who's this been directed at feeling? Okay, well, you know, and I would try and, I guess my immediate reaction is to always be like, okay, how should I respond to make it better for them? And sometimes that means not saying something immediately. And sometimes like taking some time and then going back to the situation is easier. And sometimes it's easier just to say, you know what, I'm just going to like I'm just going to like stop this in its tracks and say something. I think I've like definitely got it wrong at times as well.
I was 6 foot when I was 11,
Yeah.
so I was naturally the target of quite a lot of bullying, and so I tended to be the quiet one. And it was only when I got to university that I really found my voice. And I realized that in 3,000 guys, 5 girls had a lot of power, because everybody wanted us to be friends. Let's be honest about this. And I used that power then. And then when I got onto a construction site, I mean, I left college not knowing the difference. And this is the hilarious thing for me about universities. I left college not knowing the difference between contracting and consulting. So I ended up being a contractor totally by chance, because I had no idea there was any difference, because the college didn't in any way prepare me, mostly because it's a military college, and so they were training future leaders of the Royal Engineers and stuff like that. And they were amazing people to be educated with. I mean, we did some stuff that no other university does. And it was brilliant as an education in engineering. But it didn't give me any understanding of what the industry was like. I walked out onto my first construction site. I was a site engineer on the M25 widening, junction 10 to 11. And I did those reinforced earth walls that you see on the sides of the motorway. If you ever drive around the motorway, I spent 6 months doing reinforced earth walls, ladies. It was not exciting. But in that environment, I came across lots of people who were saying one thing and doing something else. And I became notorious. Molan 15, will you please be quiet? I need to get the last word on this radio. And I was absolutely notorious for never giving anyone the last word, because I always had to make sure that I'd made my point. And it just went on from there. But yeah, I mean, there are times when I open my mouth and I go, oh Lord, did that just come out? And I actually said that out loud. And when we built Spinnaker Tower, my project director on that said to me that, Yvonne, you really have got to learn to just pause for a second before you open your mouth, because you were going to upset everybody. And I was like, okay. So I do try now to pause, but often I don't. And yeah.
I think that, like, for me, I think a big thing is like, especially when I first started working, I didn't really say anything. And I remember sort of occasionally asking other people to kind of like, I think I remember saying to someone, can you just play your card? Because like, I don't want to waste mine now on something that I didn't think was like fair or whatever it was. But then I realized, I think it wasn't until I was like a section engineer and I had women working like in my team, and I was like, okay, so this sort of like behavior, or this sort of, my experience at work, I was like, oh, suddenly this is bigger than me. Like, this isn't just me, this is them now. And so that was like, okay, well, even if I, and to your point, Tina, of like, if you're not that outspoken, like, and you might not always feel confident to say something for yourself, like, you're definitely the sort of person that would say something for somebody else. Like, you are like one of my biggest cheerleaders, and you would always tell me to like say the right thing, right? So I feel like that sometimes it's easier to kind of say the right thing on behalf of other people. So yeah, I think that definitely for me was a turning point of being like, okay, well, now I'm responsible for these other people.
And that's really important. As a team leader, your team need to know that you've got them, and that they are safe in your care, and that they can be as wild or as wacky as they want to be, because the wilder and wacky we allow people to be, the more we're going to create amazing solutions. So Bryony, where do you see the biggest change in construction in the next 5 years?
Okay, so there is some research that was done by Randstad, and they basically did a poll of like just over 4,000 construction workers. And out of that, 41% of women said that they'd been on the receiving end of inappropriate comments or behaviour from male colleagues. So that's 2 out of 5 women. So for me, over the next 5 years, I'd like to see a reduction in that number.
So, I mean, at the moment we are like this minority, 11% or whatever the hell it is. If there was 30% women or 40% women, then that behaviour would naturally become less because people would automatically check themselves. Because once there's more women in the room, then it's less likely that men are going to make inappropriate advances. Do we think that would work? I mean, is forcing it a good idea?
So I've thought about this right from the kind of start of my career in the industry. I remember drawing a flow chart that was like, do we just put a load of women in and then it will make it better, or do we make it better, then that will encourage more women to come in? And for me, it's a cycle. So I think like the protective person in me is like, why should we recruit more women to an industry where 41% of them are going to be subject to inappropriate comments from male colleagues? Part of me is like, is that morally like the right thing to do? And then I think like the other part of me is completely what you just said, is if we had more women, then, you know, would like, and you know, the more women there are, the more strong female networks there are. You know, even just by like knowing that you've got someone that's got your back or unfortunately has also experienced that, and you know, that sort of thing, like that definitely helps you. So yeah, I'm always torn on that that question, and I don't know what the solution is. I think genuinely maybe if we went for both, then you know, if we brought in more women and we tried to address the culture at the same time, then hopefully they would both be positively reinforcing to each other.
You would hope so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I think that you know what I've definitely seen. Tina will vouch for this, that I've become like, I'm not ashamed to like say it exactly how it is, and talk like very openly about like what sort of behaviours that we're talking about here. But I think just by even opening that conversation has made a lot of people realise that it's not something that just used to happen like 20 years ago. It's just something that they don't know happens anymore. And I think that just by having those conversations and making people aware has been, I think, Tina, we've both seen a shift. And I, you know, and that's sort of where like reverse mentoring for me was a big opportunity, I guess. I think I once said that it allows you to turn personal negative into business positive, which is a very corporate line. But it kind of is true, right? You know, I had all these like experiences and I didn't know what to do with them, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go and tell these like really senior people about it, and they might not do anything with it either, but at least I've got it off my chest and now they know. And most of the time they did do something about it, and that was really like for me that was really powerful to know that they supported supported my feelings of annoyance, as it were, and validated that it was okay to be like annoyed or upset about it.
How did you go from, so I've seen this reverse mentoring progress from an idea you had and this wanting to tell senior people how you feel, or maybe not how you feel, that's not the right way of saying it, of what's not right and what's not fair, into now being business as usual and, you know, a standard scheme in the company. How would you go from good idea to business as usual?
I think for me, and this is like, you know, this is kind of now my job in more full time is looking at, you know, ways that we can improve things and how do we get to where we want to be without sort of like completely changing everything straight away. I think like my natural instinct is like, right, we need to make this change. So like, right, that's it. Like, we're going to make that change tomorrow, and like that's going to be it. Like that in my mind, like in my personal life, I'm like, right, I'm going to make this change, and like it just happens. But I appreciate that like business change takes a lot longer. So I think like for me with reverse mentoring, it was like, okay, I was like fundamentally driven by my experiences and the experience of other women, and I was like, okay, right, let's just focus on something small scale that we can, you know, we can make a difference with 15, 16 people. And if it grows, it grows. And if it doesn't, at least we've like brought benefit there. So I think for me that the importance is to like make sure that you're adding value and bringing benefit at every like step of the process. And so you're not disheartened if it doesn't go to the, you know, the full scale that you want it to go. But it also means that you're not like rushing to get there. You're like focusing on like making an immediate impact and a positive change in the, you know, in the 1 to 3 months that you're focused on, rather than like trying to like change everything all at once.
It's pretty amazing.
I love that,
I'd love,
breaking it down into manageable steps.
yeah, I'd love to carry on chatting about this all evening, but I'm aware that we've run through our time really quickly this evening, which is sad. I think we're going to have you back on already. I've got a feeling this conversation needs to go on. It's been absolute pleasure being here. Yeah, thanks very much for your time. I definitely think we'll reconvene this one on a different date to get some more insight in a few months' time.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's been really nice to chat to you both. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Engineering Rebuilt. We hope you enjoyed being part of the conversation. Please join us next time to hear more diverse stories from people who are reclaiming their narrative to rebuild engineering.